I mean, the first response to that is, you can't. I don't care how determined you are to escape the culture. You can't escape the culture. And I want to go a little backwards in biblical theology here. And I just want to say, evidently, that it was very important to God's plan that we be social creatures. And so there would have been, even without sin, in Eden, there would have been a culture. There would have been a civilization. That would have been without sin. And frankly, we can't honestly really take full account of that because we are sinners living in a sinful society. But the idea of civilization is something that is unavoidable when you have human beings in a web of relationships. So sociologists would say what you have is a cultural system, and that cultural system is nearly impossible to escape. So let me tell you, Christians have tried this. So for instance, and it even goes beyond that. And you go back into the history of Israel. I mean, you had groups like the Essenes that tried to escape into the desert. Guess what? They didn't escape. Or you have early Christians. I think of someone like Simon Stylites, a figure from church history who went out in the middle of the desert to sit on top of a column, to escape culture, more or less. And, the fact that we're talking about him means that didn't happen. He didn't escape the culture. You've had Christians who have, left one place to go to another place. You can even just think of the Puritan pilgrims, who came to the United States when it was not yet the United States. And yet they brought with them a culture, and they helped begin a culture. Now, another thing I need to say is that there is no such thing as culture, okay? This is the way former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher used to say this. There's no such thing as society. And so I'm not contradicting myself. I'm simply saying it's really cultures. And we experience culture from one vantage point. So in other words, thanks be to God, we're not addressed by the entire culture all the time. But there's an entire cultural system out there, even a network of cultures. I mean, there's a sense in which, every local congregation is to be a culture under the sovereignty of Christ. Every Christian home, every Christian marriage, every Christian family is to be a cultural system under the lordship of Christ. But we are part of a larger culture, or a part of a larger cultural system, and there's no escaping it. And one of the first things we need to recognize is that you cannot have a cultural system without language, and you can't have language without a cultural system. So you and I are communicating in the English language. We're experiencing culture, we're exercising culture right now. So much so that, a lot of academics call it a cultural linguistic system. And it's because that's just, one of the evidences of it. Here in the United States, at least we're supposed to drive on the right side of the road. That's a part of a cultural system. And it doesn't really matter how much you want to be a part of the system or not. You can't drive on the left side of the road. So in other words, it's just a lot there. And, Christians are sometimes tempted to say, well, I'm not going to have anything to do with that culture. Well, and then they tell us they have a doctor's appointment, a dentist appointment, and, they're reading this book and all this. You just think, you're lying to yourself if you think you're not a part of this culture. Now, here's where being in the world but not of it, I think, makes an awful lot of sense to Christians. And you say, well, I don't know what that means. Well, what it means is you are a part of a culture by God's plan and sovereignty. And yet you can't embrace the corruptions of that culture. And you can't assume in any generation, by the way, that the culture is going to raise our children or preach the gospel. That's why God gave us the family and the church, because the church is going to preach the gospel, and the family is going to raise the children. And so we just need to understand that's still in the context of a culture. It always has been, going all the way back to the Old Testament, as God's telling His people. Read the book of Deuteronomy, just one book of the Bible, as God speaking through Moses to get His children ready to go into Canaan without becoming Canaanites. And then you look at the New Testament and you see, for instance, the epistles of the Apostle Paul, and he's writing to Christians about how to be in the world, but not to be corrupted by the world.